The recycled air of the starship Torvax hummed with the distinct scent of anxious predators. Captain Raxus Villalobos stood on the command deck, his scaled claws clicking impatiently against the polished metal of his command console. 7 feet tall with iridescent purple scales and a jaw that could crush titanium, Raxus was the most decorated division commander in the Galactic Hegemony's fleet. Around him, the bridge buzzed with the activities of his elite crew, all members of various apex predator species from across the known galaxies. Navigational Officer Zex, a life felinoid with retractable claws that could slice through reinforced steel, plotted their course through the Andromeda Rift. Weapons Specialist Krill, whose Vargarian heritage gave him the ability to scent fear from 3 decks away, monitored the ship's formidable arsenal. Communications Lead Thrix, a telepathic mantoid whose ancestors had once devoured their mates after procreation, maintained radio silence as ordered. They were the most feared hunting party in 17 star systems, and they were all deeply unsettled by the presence of their newest crew member. "Where is she?" Raxus growled, his double rows of teeth gleaming under the blue glow of the command console. Lieutenant Drex, his second in command, a hulking reptilian with armored skin, flicked his tongue nervously. "The human is in the galley, Captain." Again, Raxus's facial ridges furrowed. "What is she doing there?" "Consuming nutrients, sir." "For the 5th time today." The captain's tail lashed in agitation. "Bring her to me. Now." For minutes later, Lieutenant Riley Johnson sauntered onto the bridge, wiping crumbs from her uniform. At 5'6", she was the smallest being on the ship by at least 1.5 feet. Her skin was soft, her teeth were flat, and her nails couldn't even scratch the surface of the ship's softest upholstery. Yet somehow, inexplicably, she was the most terrifying creature aboard the Torvax. "You summon me, Captain Fluffy Scales?" Riley asked, a lopsided smile on her face. The bridge fell silent. Several crew members slowly backed away from the human. No one had ever addressed the captain with anything less than his full title and at least 3 honorifics. And Fluffy was a word that had never been applied to any division in the history of their bloodthirsty species. Raxus's inner eyelids blinked rapidly, a sign of extreme distress among his kind. "Lieutenant Johnson, we are approaching the Hegemony outpost. I require your expertise for the upcoming mission." "Cool," Riley replied, dropping casually into the navigator's chair. Zex hissed and leapt away as if the seat had suddenly become electrified. "What's the gig this time?" "More mysterious alien tech that nobody can figure out." "Precisely," Raxus said, his voice strained with forced patience. Such vulnerable body language would signal imminent death. Yet here she was, entirely unconcerned. "I'm guessing the usual eggheads couldn't crack it?" she asked. Weapons Specialist Krill let out a low growl. 17 of our most brilliant minds attempted to activate the device. 3 lost their appendages. 2 were vaporized. "Bummer," Riley said, spinning lazily in the chair. "Did anyone try turning it off and on again?" The bridge erupted in nervous chittering, the Torvax's crew exchanging glances that conveyed a universal sentiment. The human was clearly insane. "Rami, Lieutenant Drex, and Specialist Krill. The rest of you maintain battle readiness." Riley nodded, tapping something into her personal device. "Just let me finish this level of Candy Crush." "You will cease your recreational activities immediately," Raxus snarled, looming over her and weapon turrets. Through the transparent barrier, Raxus could see a smooth, cylindrical object about the size of his forearm, covered in intricate etchings that seemed to shift and change as he watched. "We've lost 5 researchers attempting to determine its purpose," Grak explained. "It appears to be a weapon of immense power. The last victim was liquefied." Riley pressed her face against the barrier, squinting at the artifact. "Huh. What do you observe, Lieutenant?" Raxus asked. "Well, for starters, you've got it upside down." Before anyone could stop her, Riley had bypassed the security panel with a few taps of her fingers, strode into the containment chamber, and picked up the deadly artifact. "Stop," Grak roared, activating the alarm system. "It will dissolve your internal organs." Riley turned the cylinder, pressed something on its base, and the etchings lit up with a soft blue glow. "Nah, it was just instant. That's because you were trying to access the battery compartment by force. These things have a security feature. If you try to break them open, they release a defensive gel." Riley turned the toy over, revealing a small compartment. "You're supposed to change the power cell through here, using the key that's built into the base." The room fell silent except for the cheerful music emanating from the deadly weapon. 3 days later, as the Torvax sped toward its next mission, Raxus found himself in an unprecedented situation. He was sharing his private dining quarters with the human, attempting to understand her species better. High Command had demanded a full report on how humans could so easily master technologies that baffled their best minds. "So you're telling me," Raxus said, watching in fascination as Riley dipped a fried tuber into a red sauce, "that your species reached space travel without evolving as apex predators?" "Yep," Riley said, popping the food into her mouth. "We're basically persistence hunters with opposable thumbs and anxiety. But without natural weapons, no claws, no venom, weak jaws, how did you survive?" Riley grinned. "We're good at figuring stuff out. And we're really, really stubborn." This matched what Raxus had observed. The human approached every problem with a strange combination of laziness and insight, often solving in minutes what his specialists had struggled with for days. "There is something else I do not understand," Raxus admitted, his voice lowered so the crew couldn't overhear. "You show no fear. Even the most battle-hardened warriors of the hegemony display appropriate caution around superior predators. Yet you—" He gestured at her with a clawed hand that could tear through her fragile skin without effort. Riley laughed, a
sound that still made his scales bristle. "Oh, I'm terrified most of the time, Captain. Humans just hide it well. We call it fake it till you make it. You pretend not to be afraid." The concept was so alien to Raxus that he struggled to comprehend it.
"Sure. Plus, I figured out pretty quickly that on a ship full of predators, showing fear is basically painting a target on my back." She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "So I went the other way. In human culture, there's this thing called big dog energy. When you act like you're the most powerful person in the room, others start to believe it." Raxus blinked slowly, processing this information. "You're saying that your apparent fearlessness is a deception? More like a survival strategy?" Riley shrugged. "Besides, after a while, you realize that under all those teeth and claws, you guys are just big softies worried about your performance reviews." Before Raxus could respond to this outrageous statement, the ship's alert system blared. "Captain to the bridge," the AI announced. "Unidentified vessel approaching." On the bridge, the crew was in a state of controlled panic. A massive ship had appeared seemingly out of nowhere, its design unlike anything in the Hegemony database. No response to hails, communications lead Thrix reported, her insectoid features rigid with tension. "Their technology appears to be blocking our scans." "Weapons systems online," Krill announced, his fur standing on end. "But I cannot get a target lock." Raxus assessed the situation with the cool calculation of a seasoned predator. "Maintain distance. Continue attempts at communication." The view screen flickered, and suddenly they were looking at the bridge of the alien vessel. The creatures operating it were unlike anything Raxus had seen before, tall, willowy beings with translucent skin through which complex circulatory systems were visible. Their eyes were enormous, pupilless orbs that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. One stepped forward, its movements fluid like water. When it spoke, the ship's translator struggled to process the language, producing only fragmented output. "Claim this sector. Inferior species. Prepare for harvesting." Raxus straightened to his full height. This is Captain Raxus Vielower of the Hegemony vessel Torvax. You have entered our sovereign territory. State your intentions or be destroyed. The alien's expression didn't change, if it even had expressions, but its next words came through clearly enough. Your threats are meaningless. Your technology is primitive. You will be processed. The view screen went dark and the alien ship began to move toward them. Evasive maneuvers, Raxus ordered. Prepare main weapons array. Riley, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly stood up. Wait, I recognize them. All eyes turned to the human. Those are crystalline harvesters, she said. We encountered them near Earth about 70 years ago. They're not after your territory. They're silicon-based life forms. They eat minerals. How do we stop them? Drex demanded. You don't fight them, Riley said. You trade with them. They're collectors. They love unique compounds. And I'm betting they've never encountered some of the synthetic materials we use for hegemony uniforms. Raxus stared at her. You want me to offer them our clothing? Not all of it, Riley said with a wink that made several crew members gasp. Just the specially treated fabric used for your dress uniforms. It has unique molecular properties they'll find delicious. Against all his instincts as a predator, Raxus followed the human's advice. 20 minutes later, he was watching in disbelief as the massive alien vessel departed peacefully, their cargo hold filled with ceremonial uniform fabric from the Torvax's stores. How did you know that would work? Raxus asked Riley as the bridge crew stared at her with new respect. I didn't, she admitted cheerfully. But humans have a saying, when in doubt, try snacks. Most disagreements can be solved with food. Krill made a sound that might have been a laugh, the first time Raxus had ever heard such a noise from the serious weapons specialist. You risked our lives on a guess? Raxus should have been furious, but instead found himself impressed by the audacity. Educated guess, Riley corrected. Besides, worst case scenario, I figured we could still shoot them while they were distracted by the free samples. For the first time since the human had come aboard, Raxus felt something shift in his perception. Perhaps there was something to be said for the strange, soft species that survived through cleverness rather than strength. As weeks passed, the crew of the Torvax gradually adapted to their human crewmates' peculiar ways. They learned that her constant snacking was due to humans' inefficient metabolism. They discovered that her bizarre habit of napping was not, in fact, a sign of weakness, but a cognitive strategy. Most disturbingly, they found themselves adopting some of her mannerisms. Thrix had been caught using the word basically, and even Drex had attempted a sarcastic eye roll, which looked terrifying with his reptilian features. The mission that changed everything began as a routine recovery operation. The Torvax was dispatched to an abandoned research station at the edge of the Hegemony's territory. According to intelligence, the station had been studying interdimensional physics before a catastrophic accident had forced its evacuation. I want a full hazard team, Raxus ordered as they approached the derelict structure floating in the void. Lieutenant Johnson, you will remain on the ship until we determine it is safe. Riley, who was balancing a writing utensil on her upper lip for reasons no one could fathom, let the object clatter to the console. Come on, Captain. All the cool stuff happens on the away missions. This is not a request, Lieutenant. The station could be contaminated. For once, Riley didn't argue, though her expression suggested she was plotting something. Raxus should have recognized the danger signs. The boarding party, led by Raxus himself, found the station eerily intact. Power systems were functional, life support operational, but there was no sign of the 57 researchers who had been stationed there. No biological residue, Drex reported, scanning the empty corridors. No signs of struggle. They simply vanished. They reached the central laboratory, where a massive apparatus dominated the room, a ring of unknown metal suspended between pylons of crystalline material. The device was active, humming with energy, its center a swirling vortex of purple-black distortion. Some kind of portal, Krill suggested, his sensors trained on the phenomenon. "Do not approach," Raxus ordered. "We need to shut it down safely and whoa, cool. Is that a wormhole?" All four predators spun around, fangs and claws extended in instinctive response to the unexpected voice. Riley stood in the doorway, wearing what appeared to be her sleeping attire and holding a steaming mug of coffee. "Lieutenant Johnson," Raxus growled, his voice dropping to the dangerous register that made most species lose control of their bladders. "You directly disobeyed my order." Riley took a sip from her mug, entirely unfazed. "Technically, you said to stay on the ship until you determined it was safe. You've been here 20 minutes and no one's died, so I figured, safe enough." Before Raxus could respond, the portal's energy suddenly surged. The vortex expanded, tendrils of dark energy reaching out like hungry tentacles. "Take cover," Raxus shouted, diving behind a console. Everyone moved with the lightning reflexes of apex predators, except Riley, who stood transfixed, staring at the portal with an expression of wonder rather than fear. "Lieutenant, move," Raxus roared. Too late. A tendril of energy touched Riley's outstretched hand, and she vanished in a flash of light. For several seconds, no one moved. Then Raxus was on his feet, already calculating how to explain the loss of their human specialist to High Command. "Scan for residual traces," he ordered. "We need to determine if the portal flared again," and Riley stumbled back into the room, still holding her coffee mug, though now wearing a shimmering crown and a bemused expression. "That was awesome," she exclaimed. The predators stared at her in shock. "Lieutenant," Raxus said carefully, "what happened? Where did you go?" "Some kind of parallel dimension," Riley said, taking another casual sip of her coffee. "Met the researchers. They're fine. Actually, they're better than fine. They're, like, royalty there. Turns out the native species worship beings from our dimension as gods. The scientists are living it up with temples and everything." She adjusted the crown on her head. "They gave me this. Apparently, I'm the goddess of bizarre survival strategies now. Got a whole pantheon worked out based on evolutionary traits." Raxus felt his iridges twitch. "The researchers chose to stay in this other dimension? Voluntarily." "Oh, yeah," Riley nodded. "Free food, adoration, no performance reviews. Scientific paradise. They said they were going to send a message explaining everything, but I guess interdimensional mail is unreliable." She glanced at the portal. "They did mention one small problem, though." "Which is?" Drex asked, his tail twitching nervously. "The portal works both ways, and the natives are super curious about our dimension." Riley gestured at the swirling vortex just as it pulsed with new energy. "So, we might have company." As if on cue, the portal expanded, and shapes began to emerge. Elegant, ghostly creatures with too many limbs and glowing cores where their hearts should be. They moved with liquid grace, their bodies seeming to phase in and out of reality. Krill raised his weapon, but Riley stepped in front of him. "No, they're friendly. Just enthusiastic tourists." The lead entity floated toward Raxus, its appendages waving in what might have been greeting or threat. It made a sound like wind through crystal, which the translator rendered as, "We seek knowledge of the tooth-bearing gods and their mighty vessels." Raxus looked at Riley, who gave him a thumbs up and a grin that he had come to recognize as her "trust me, I'm improvising" expression. 27 hours later, the Torvax was host to 34 interdimensional tourists who followed the Predator crew with worshipful attention, taking images with devices that bent light in impossible ways and asking endless questions about consumption rituals and dominance displays. Raxus found Riley in the observation deck, where she was explaining the concept of vacation photos to 3 of the visitors. "Lieutenant," he said, keeping his voice level with considerable effort, a word. In his private office, Raxus paced while Riley lounged in a chair designed for a being twice her size, her legs dangling. "This situation is unprecedented," he said finally. I have tourists from another reality expecting a cruise experience, researchers who have effectively defected to become gods, and high command demanding explanations. Could be worse, Riley offered. At least these guys are peaceful. And they're bringing in some cool tech as trade. That gravity manipulator they gave engineering? Zex says it'll improve our propulsion efficiency by like 300%. Raxus stopped pacing. You arranged a technology exchange? Sure, Riley shrugged. Standard first contact protocol where I'm from. Make friends, trade shiny stuff, establish diplomatic relations. Humans have a first contact protocol that doesn't involve establishing dominance? Raxus couldn't hide his disbelief. Well, yeah. Turns out when you're a species without natural weapons, you get really good at making allies. She grinned. You guys could learn a thing or two from a soft, squishy types. Raxus found himself speechless, a rare condition for a Dravision captain. For generations, the hegemony had expanded through conquest and intimidation. The idea of advancement through cooperation was alien. Yet here was living proof. In the 3 months since Riley had joined his crew, the Torvax had acquired 7 new technologies, established peaceful contact with 3 previously hostile species, and now opened relations with an entirely new dimension. Lieutenant Johnson, Raxus said slowly, I believe I may have underestimated your species. Riley's smile softened. That's okay, Captain. Most predators do. It's kind of our secret weapon. How so? Being underestimated means people don't see you coming. She stood up, suddenly serious. Humans survived on a planet full of things that could kill us by being adaptable and working together. We're not the strongest or the fastest, but we're really good at finding unusual solutions and making friends in unexpected places. Raxus considered this. Is that why High Command insists on placing humans on predator ships? As some sort of diplomatic experiment. Riley laughed. Partly, but mostly because we're the only ones crazy enough to press buttons on alien tech without reading the manual first. 3 months later, the Torvax docked at the Hegemony's Central Command Station for its annual review. The massive space dock hummed with activity as ships from across the Empire arrived for inspection and reassignment. Captain Raxus Vieloer stood tall as the inspection committee boarded his vessel. Led by Grand Admiral Zorax, the most decorated and feared Dravision in the fleet, the committee moved through the ship with critical eyes, noting everything from weapons readiness to the cleanliness of the waste reclamation system. Your mission reports make for. Interesting reading, Captain, Zorax said as they completed the tour, his ancient scales shifting in what might have been amusement or disgust. Particularly your unorthodox solutions to recent encounters. Thank you, Admiral, Raxus replied carefully. That was not necessarily a compliment. Zorax's inner eyelids flickered. You've established trade relations where we expected conquest. You've integrated alien technology rather than claiming it as spoils of war. And most disturbingly, you appear to have allowed your human specialist extraordinary latitude in decision-making. Raxus straightened. Lieutenant Johnson has proven to be an invaluable asset to the ship. So it would seem. Zorax glanced around the bridge, where the crew was standing at rigid attention. Where is this remarkable human? I expected her to be present for inspection. A moment of awkward silence followed. Lieutenant Johnson is preparing herself, Admiral, Drex finally offered. Zorax's head tilted in the predatory angle that preceded either a kill or a promotion. Preparing? Inspection was scheduled for 0800 hours precisely. Yes, sir, Raxus acknowledged. However, humans have certain biological imperatives that operate on their own schedule. As if summoned by the conversation, the bridge doors slid open and Riley walked in, uniform perfectly pressed, hair neatly arranged, and expression uncharacteristically professional. Lieutenant Riley Johnson reporting for inspection. Sir, she said, snapping a flawless salute. Zorax studied her with the intensity of a predator assessing prey. Lieutenant. Your methods have caused quite a stir in high command. Only good stirs, I hope, sir, Riley replied with just a hint of her usual irreverence. That remains to be determined. Zorax circled her slowly. You established contact with an interdimensional species without authorization. You reprogrammed the ship's central computer to play something called disco music during battle stations. And you somehow convinced the crystalline harvesters, a species that has destroyed 3 hegemony outposts, to trade valuable technology for fabric. Riley maintained her composure. Innovation often requires thinking outside standard parameters, Admiral. Indeed, Zorax stopped his circling. It has not escaped our notice that under Captain Villalobos' command, with your assistance, this ship has achieved its mission objectives with 87% less casualties and 143% increase in acquired technologies compared to other vessels of its class. Riley's professional mask slipped just enough to reveal a smile. Just doing my job, sir. Your job, Zorax repeated, which seems to include teaching predator species how to behave like prey. The bridge temperature seemed to drop several degrees. With respect, Admiral, Riley said, her voice suddenly firm, humans aren't prey. We're survivors. There's a difference. Explain, Zorax demanded. Prey runs and hides. Survivors adapt and overcome. Riley gestured around the bridge. Every predator species evolved to be the perfect killing machine for their environment. Humans evolved to change their environment instead. We're not dangerous because we have claws or venom. We're dangerous because we see possibilities where others see only threats. The bridge crew held their breath collectively. No one spoke to an admiral this way, especially not a soft, clawless human. Zorax was silent for a long moment. Then, to everyone's shock, he made a sound that might have been laughter, a harsh, rasping noise that few had ever heard from a Dravision of his rank. Captain Villalobos, he said finally, High Command has reviewed your mission logs and come to a decision. The Torvax is to be reassigned. Raxus stiffened, preparing for the worst. Your new designation, Zorax continued, is Diplomatic Exploration Vessel. You will be the first of a new class of ships tasked with establishing contact with previously avoided species and regions. Lieutenant Johnson will be promoted to commander and serve as your first officer. The bridge erupted in confused clicking and hissing as the Predator crew tried to process this unprecedented development. Admiral, Raxus questioned carefully. The hegemony has conquered 87% of known space through traditional means, Zorax explained. Yet we find ourselves at an impasse with the remaining territories. Your unorthodox methods suggest an alternative approach. He turned to Riley. Humans have proven themselves unusually adept at forming alliances. This ability may serve the hegemony's interests in ways we had not previously considered. Riley's eyes widened. You're creating a whole ship class based on my methods? Based on the successful integration of human adaptive strategies with predator strength, Zorax corrected. The first of many, if this experiment proves successful. As the Admiral departed, the bridge remained silent until Riley finally broke the tension. So, she said, turning to Raxus with a grin that would have terrified lesser predators, looks like I'm your second in command now. First order of business, casual Fridays. Raxus felt his facial ridges twitch in what his crew had recently started calling his almost smile. Commander Johnson, he said formally, I believe the hegemony has severely underestimated how dangerous humans truly are. Riley's laugh echoed through the bridge. Captain, you have no idea. We haven't even introduced you to our music yet. As the Torvax prepared for its new mission, word spread throughout the hegemony fleet. Beware the ships with humans aboard. They might not have claws or fangs, but somehow, inexplicably, they always ended up in charge.